Hello, this is Vox Evening News brought to you from London. The time is 6 o'clock. I'm Kesha Gitari. Let's start with a look at tonight's headlines. Widows of activists killed by Nigeria's former military regime file a lawsuit against the oil giant Shell. On day 2 of the Afrexim Bank AGM, discussions focused on the need for regional integration in order to boost intra-Africa trade. And violence in the Central African Republic is at an all-time high as a ceasefire agreement is broken. Widows of 4 of the 9 men executed by Nigeria's military regime in 1995 have filed a civil lawsuit at The Hague accusing Royal Dutch Shell of alleged complicity in a military crackdown. The deaths of the men, known as the Ogoni 9, provoked an international outcry. The lawsuit accuses the oil giant of providing support to the military, which ultimately led to the execution of the men, the best known of whom was activist Ken Saro-Wiwa. Supported by Amnesty International, the widows have brought the civil case demanding an apology and an unspecified amount in compensation. Shell, the largest oil producer in Nigeria, has repeatedly denied any involvement in the executions, but has faced multiple lawsuits in various countries relating to the executions. 8 years ago, it agreed in an out-of-court settlement in the US to pay more than $15 million to a group of the men's relatives. Now, Nigeria formally started exporting yam to Europe on Thursday. Agriculture Minister Adu Ogbehe said that in the first phase, 72 tons of yam will be exported to the United Kingdom. Speaking at a press conference in the capital, Abuja, he stated that Nigeria accounts for 61% of the total yam output in the world, but it doesn't export it like neighboring Ghana, which could earn some $4 billion from its yam exports over the next 3 to 4 years. The Agriculture Minister said that as the diversification drive continued, solar coolers would be used to store the yam crop throughout the year. The South African Agriculture Minister has announced that the country has culled 260,000 birds so far in a bid to contain the H5N1 bird flu outbreak. The outbreak of the avian flu on at least 2 farms has been confirmed. Zimbabwe, Namibia and Botswana have suspended poultry imports from South Africa this week following the announcement of the outbreak.
Despite the warnings, the disease still managed to get into our flocks. 2 cases, one in a broiler breeder farm in Villiers and another in an egg-laying farm in Standerton, were reported on since 22 of June. We have placed the affected farms under quarantine and the affected birds have been euthanized and the eggs destroyed. Approximately 260,000 birds have been culled. The meat that is on the shelves is safe to eat as it has gone through a process of meat inspection and certified fit for human consumption. A number of trade partners have suspended trade on raw meat, eggs and live birds from South Africa.
The first World Health Organization Health Forum opened in Africa in Rwanda on Wednesday. Under the theme Putting People First, the road to universal health coverage in Africa. The event aims to highlight the challenges and opportunities to improve health services across the continent.
We need better financing for health in Africa, and we need to be more efficient with allocating the resources that already are in place and with dispersing them and using them, targeting them for equity, ensuring that we use data to know who is being left behind, and we make policy decisions and support governments to implement programs that cover those gaps. We talked a lot about the role of the private sector. For me, this was one of the most interesting and exciting aspects of this conference. And my takeaway message is that the private sector is a legitimate and critical partner of governments in helping them to reach universal health coverage, and that governments have to play a regulatory role, have to provide the regulatory framework in which the private sector can contribute and make sure that their contributions also help to have equitable access to affordable health services for all populations.
On the second day of the Afreximbank annual general meeting held this week in Kigali, discussions focused on the lack of regional integration, as participants talked about the best ways to boost intra-Africa trade throughout the experiences of African trade champions, such as the solutions best used to ease integration of African economies. One of them being to facilitate exchanges in the context of multiple currencies. They also studied ways for governments to impart good practices through national and regional policies. One of the participants, Ade Adefeko, is the vice president at Olam Nigeria, and he shared his views with Voxafrica.
We do not do enough trade amongst ourselves. We should do more trade amongst ourselves in Africa. We always prefer to do a lot of trade with the West and the Far East. Olam started in Nigeria, so Olam has Nigerian origin and roots, but we're owned by Temasek of Singapore and Mitsubishi of Japan. And we've been around for about 28 years, and we do a lot of things, particularly in the food sector. Afrexim gives opportunity for African countries to have a kind of dialogue amongst themselves for trade. We should try and boost tourism. Visa restrictions are inhibiting trade. Coming to Rwanda yesterday, I mean, you got your visa on arrival, that's how it should be. So we should have visa-less entries, if you know what I mean, into countries. And I think Paul Kagame, who is the AU chair, is working on that with his Pan-Africanist vision in terms of AU passport. With an AU passport, you can go into any country among. So I think that's a very, very good first step. How well they implement that and effect that will be very nice. So I'm one who believes in Pan-Africanism. I'm one who believes in the fact that we must do business with ourselves and let our products circulate. Every country in Africa has comparative advantage in something. Cote d'Ivoire, for example, in cocoa and cashew. Nigeria in yam, cassava, sesame. Mozambique, so across the entire value chain in agriculture, I think we're here to stay. And of course, you know that just 2 days ago, the Nigerian Nigerian former Minister of Agriculture and current AFDB president got the prize for food security, the Nobel Food Prize, which comes with a prize of $250,000. And that's quite impressive. So we need to walk the talk and stop the rhetoric. We need to really try and enhance and boost African trade.
Ghana has signed a $10 billion memorandum of understanding with China to develop its bauxite industry. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, Senior Minister Ya Osafo-Mfo said the funds of the MOU will be used to develop the country's bauxite project with its railway and converting bauxite into aluminium. The money will come from the Chinese Development Bank. Details such as interest rates and terms have not yet been decided. The Egyptian government has significantly increased the cost of petrol and diesel fuel. The second such hike since the currency was floated in November. Petrol prices have gone up overnight by over 40% and diesel by over 50%. The removal of fuel subsidies are said to be part of a strict IMF-supported reform program. By contrast, a week ago, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi announced extra funding for food subsidies, pensions and the provision of social safety nets. Analysts say that food and energy subsidies take up a quarter of the state's spending. Now, supporters of a yes vote in Mali's upcoming referendum on constitutional reform held a rally in the capital, Bamako, on Wednesday. The demonstration follows a delay of the initial referendum date, July 9th, by officials. Activists have called for the government to halt the entire process and organize nationwide consultations first. It is unknown whether this is being considered as an option or when the referendum is likely to take place.
Nous nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui, les jeunes du Mali, les femmes du Mali, We are meeting here together, Mali's young people, Mali's women, to say yes to the constitutional reform because, quite simply, we feel that is the constitutional change will really reinforce Mali's democracy. This reform project, contrary to what is being said by certain parts of the opposition, who think that is a project aimed to turn the president into a monarch, this project will make the president a despot. We think that no, is the opposite.
Oui, nous sommes favorables à cette réforme
We are in
constitutionnelle.
favour of this constitutional reform because we think that it is government policy and we believe in the political authorities. If they decide to carry out the reform, it's because it's necessary, particularly as they are talking about peace building. I think that this impasse has lasted a long time, crisis has been long, and it is really necessary for us to vote yes in this referendum because it is for peace building.
C'est pour lutter contre la corruption.
It's to fight against corruption, quite simply. The president, when he came into power, he promised the people that he would fight against corruption, and that is what's happening. Those who don't want the reform, they don't want that fight against corruption, and that is why they are mobilizing people who haven't really understood why they are saying no.
Well, we're heading into a short commercial break, but still to come on this evening's programme. 4 activists arrested during a peaceful protest in the Democratic Republic of Congo have now been released. A lawsuit has been filed against the French bank BNP by NGOs for its alleged role in supporting the Rwandan genocide. And we hear from the Gabonese ambassador to the UK ahead of Friday's Africa Day celebrations.